Well, wanting to respect everybody's time, shall we? I mean, we have a quorum, correct? So I think we can just jump on in. So let's go ahead and call this meeting to order, and we can add folks as they arrive. Shall we call the roll, please?
Committee Member Carlton. Did you respond? Sorry, you're muted.
Present, sorry.
Oh, yeah, no worries, thank you. Committee Member Chasty, I'm not seeing. Committee Member Green.
Here.
Committee Member Hanson Romero. Oh, sorry, not seeing, sorry, apologies. Committee Member Moss.
Present.
And then I see Committee Member Petrilli is coming on now, so I'm just going to mark you as present. And then Chair Abbott.
And I'm here. Very good, thank you. All right, I'm going to read this statement. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupy the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of the Lejeune. We acknowledge the genocide that took place on these lands and must take strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to this indigenous people, specifically the Ohlone tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. All right, very good. I see Member Chasty has joined us, and we're moving on to item 2, the approval of the minutes. Folks had a chance to review the minutes. We can entertain a motion to approve the action minutes.
I move to approve the minutes.
All right, that's Member Green, I believe. A second.
I'll second.
Member Moss, thank you. And a vote, please.
Committee Member Carlton. Committee Member Chasty. Oh, muted it on that one.
Abstain.
Okay. Committee Member Green.
Approve.
Committee Member, okay, I'm not seeing hands from Maria. Committee Member Moss.
Yes.
Committee Member Petrilli.
Yes.
And then Chair Abbott.
And I approve as well. Very good. All right. Moving to public comment. So this is an opportunity for anybody who is tuning in to speak on items that are not on the agenda. Not so much we can do as far as response is concerned, but you're invited to share your concerns. And I am not seeing any hands. Very good. All right. Very good. And now we're moving on to announcements. Any staff or committee member announcements?
Well, I can let Isabel elaborate on this if she would like, but City Council will review the ARPA grant program for businesses at their next meeting, February 7. So that's the work that Isabel primarily put together based on feedback from the EDC. So that will be at the February 7th meeting.
Very good. Any other announcements? I can share that this Land Owner Association will be hosting their annual Lunar New Year event on February 13th. That's Sunday the 13th. It's always Super Bowl Sunday, and normally, of course, it's in the Albany Twin Theater, but this year it will be at Peralta Park, outdoors at Peralta Park. So that should be a nice event. It's 10 to noon, I believe. All right, seeing no other announcements, we will move right on to, I guess, item 6.1, long-term parklet.
Great. So I'm just going to share my screen. Just one moment. I'm going to get the slideshow. Actually, I'm going to share my screen first, and then I'll get the slideshow ready. Just one moment. Okay. Can you see the slideshow? Just the slideshow? Not my notes? Okay, good, great. So I just want to, before we get into it, I just want to kind of preface, oh, actually, wait a minute. One moment. I apologize. Let me just exit really quick. Stop share. I forgot. I need to let in some other staff members who are going to be doing their presentation. Apologies. Okay, just going to move them in, promote to panelist. Panelist, then promote to panelist. Well, okay. Let me see, just one moment. Where did my slideshow go? Oh, darn. Sorry, just one moment. My slideshow disappeared in that moment. Where did
We've all gotten so smooth over the years. I mean, it's just seamless.
I know you would think I would get somewhat better, but not quite yet. All right, here we go. I will share my screen now. And then, okay, well, now that we've had that speed bump, it'll all go smooth from here. So just want to let everyone know that we're going to be presenting results on the long-term parklets survey that was conducted. Here's some background information. The survey was part of data collection on outdoor commerce parklets in front of restaurants and storefronts. These are temporarily open in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, i.e. not including the one in front of the House office parklet or the one in front of Mr. Dewey's. This research was requested by Albany City Council and administered by the City of Albany. The purpose of this survey is to find out more about how Albany community members and businesses feel about these temporary parklets and whether there's interest in establishing a program to support long-term outdoor commerce parklets in the City of Albany. These surveys were open between December 17, 2021 and January 16, 2022. So there were two separate surveys. There's one to community members, and that's basically any Albany community member, whether you live in Albany or not, but participating in Albany activities, they could take the survey. We had 1,375 responses. For survey 2, that was directed specifically toward Albany businesses and then Berkeley businesses with that are basically in an Albany section of Solano Avenue. So part of their street is an Albany street, is essentially. So what I'll do is look at the community survey first, and then we'll go into the results for the business survey. From there, I'll turn it over to Michelle Plaus from Community Development, and she'll look at the survey results specifically from businesses on Solano Avenue, and also sort of the clusters of parklets there. And then we'll turn it over to Jeff Bond, who will look at parking specifically. So with that, we'll first look at where the parklets are in Albany. So as you can see, the primary cluster is on Solano Avenue, between San Pablo Avenue and Masonic Avenue. All right. So for the community survey, we distributed this through Albany e-News, through our social media platforms, and we provided flyers to Solano Avenue storefronts to provide to the public. These flyers had QR codes and links, so that way they could take the survey on the spot. We try to make the survey as short and simple as possible. If they wanted to elaborate, they could as well. This question is about the temporary parklets, how they feel about the temporary parklets. We're going to go into the impression of long-term parklets in a future slide. So what are your opinions about the temporary parklets that were installed after the COVID-19 pandemic began? So as you can see, primarily they are strongly supported or supported. There's not too much opposed in this community survey. But one thing I want to emphasize is whether someone was for or against the parklets, a lot of the concerns remained the same. So that was safety, that was parking, there was concerns about the design and things like that. So you're going to see those themes kind of running through this presentation. And for the general comments, you're going to see these running through. They're going to feel a little bit contradictory, and it's because they are. We wanted to get kind of give you an impression of the different opinions of the parklets. And so that's how we'll present the information. So the general comments, a lot of feel that it makes Albany feel more alive. It creates a more enjoyable public space. It's nice to have the option to eat outside with nice Bay Area weather. For the temporary parklets, it's important for COVID-19 safety and to keep restaurants going. And it also increases the sense of community. Some feel that it's too congested, and some feel they should be well constructed. Looking at So following the temporary installation of parklets on Solano Avenue, how much time and or money are you spending at businesses on Solano Avenue? The general statistics show that 57.2%, 0.12% are spending more time there. 34.29% feel there's no change, and then 8.59% feel they're spending less time on Solano Avenue. Just want to emphasize that this is subjective, how they feel. It's not tied to any specific data for how much time they're actually spending. Just want to emphasize that. What is your current opinion on a potential permanent parklet program? So there's strong support for it. General comments, the parklets add a nice ambiance to the community, like emphasized before. The loss of parking is a small price to pay toward having a lively and enjoyable Solano Avenue. The parklets reduce available parking. Some want to reduce the number of parklets, and allocation of the space must be conducted through an open and fair process. So as you can see, parking is an issue. Transparency is key, and also the community atmosphere is also what the public have kind of expressed are important. So we also asked for feedback on specific elements, and I'll just kind of run through these. The pedestrian access, make sure sidewalks are kept clear for pedestrian pass-through, encourage parklets that are elevated to the sidewalk level, high-density restaurant area between San Pablo Avenue and Evelyn Avenue should be pedestrian only. That was an opinion for that. And then prefers tables and parklets instead of the sidewalks, so there's better pedestrian access to the sidewalks. For safety, cars, some feel that cars have always driven too fast on Solano, so there's not really any change, and they feel that the parklets actually seem to slow things down. Others, for the parklets, they would like more signage, lights, to make it more visible to autos. They must be ADA compliant, should have solid protective barrier, and concern that people sitting in the parklets are not well protected from errant vehicles. And that was, there was a lot of opinions regarding the safety, so I just want to emphasize that. Use of public space for commercial activity. Trading public street space for park space with food service is seen as a good trade-off. Some feel that should be there should be a permit fee for use of public space, maybe to fund parking lots. Some feel it harms non-restaurant businesses by reducing parking, and some feel too much space is being used up for commercial activity. Onto concentration and spacing of installations. One per block to be shared by businesses. That's an idea for how to share the space. This could be better. Some are big, but seldom use the space. Others are perfect. Higher concentration means livelier streets. Livelier street installation should be well spaced so that they don't feel suffocating. And then parking access and to businesses. So some want to add more parking. So far, this has not been an issue, but would prefer to see more public transit access before prioritizing additional parking. Parking can be an issue, but the parklets encourage walkability, and some feel there needs to be a balance of parklets and parking. And then additional comments encourage more natural look / greenery with parklets and require a minimum quality threshold. So we're going to look at who completed these surveys, and this is self-attest, so this is what was said. We'll look at, so 73.23% of survey takers live in Albany. About 33% of survey takers live 1 block from Solano. 14 said that they don't live in Albany, and 7.67% own a business in Albany. You can check multiple, so some may have checked more than 1 box. And how do you usually travel to Solano? Multiple options could be selected. So 83% of survey takers walk to Solano, 17.9% of survey takers bike, 2.61% of survey takers say they use public transit to Solano, and then 53.9% of survey takers drive to Solano. So onto the business survey. So we, again, we had 125 total responses. The business survey was distributed through in our business license renewal letters, as well as the City of Albany business email list. It was emailed to them in a business e-news, and then also city staff went to Solano Avenue storefronts between San Pablo and Tulare to distribute surveys over a span of 2 days. So this is the same question as the first one in the community survey. What is your opinion on the temporary parklets? As you can see, there's still strong support, though there's more opposed than in the community survey. So that's one thing to note. General comments. It's positive for restaurants when eating inside is not allowed, contributed to atmosphere and community spirit, negatively impacted parking, which deterred potential customers, especially those from outside Albany, unsafe due to nearby car traffic and barriers that are not strong enough. Sound and music should be reviewed prior to final decisions, encourages people enjoying outdoor space and city walkability. Street sweepers cannot clean where parklets are. How has the current temporary parklet program impacted your business? Primarily, no impact. Some feel there's more feel that there is a negative impact than a positive impact. Few parking spaces for customers and clients. Parking issues negatively impact stores where customers buy products that may be transported by automobile. Some businesses that do not have a parklet near them felt they would face greater parking issues if one was nearby. So some can go to the parklets with clients in a more enjoyable outdoor environment. It's beneficial for restaurants, and the visual perception of a bustling, thriving Solano encourages folks to explore and support neighboring businesses. What is your current opinion on a potential permanent parklet program? As you can see, the support there's more support, but then the opposition continues to grow for the long-term option. General comments, it only benefits those that have one. Unfair when businesses only pay for square footage of interior space. Support for a program with thorough review process. Too early to make decision. Designs must be ADA compliant. Would prefer to have the parking spaces back when restaurants no longer have restrictions. Only highly used during dinner time. So feedback, we're going to start with design of installations, should be durable, visually appealing, should not excessively block view of other businesses, not on corners, portable and seasonal, should have guidelines and properly designed by certified professionals such as architects. For safety, must meet the same safety requirements as Albany's bus stop parklets. Use of reflectors for drivers and bicyclists. Must have liability insurance to cover parklets. Must not impede vision of drivers. For use of public space for commercial activity, liability issues should be addressed clearly, require appropriate fee for utilization, no concerns if well spaced out, and no long-term commitments, needs to have equity across all merchants. And then for the costs of the program, some feel that it should be charged based on square footage of space. Some feel it should be supported by taxpayer funds. Some feel it should be covered by the business and not the city. And then some say to keep it simple so costs don't get out of hand. So a wide range of opinions on the how it's funded. For maintenance of installation, it should be clarified with guidelines. Private owners should maintain space. Who pays for it if owner goes out of business? Concentration of spacing and installation should have restrictions and guidelines per block. 1 per block, not on corners. 2 parking spaces wide. So a very specific idea. Make it multi-use to serve multiple businesses in 1 parklet. Pedestrian access, sidewalk space sometimes used as well, which makes it harder for people with mobility issues. Should not block pedestrian traffic flow. Parking and access to businesses. Some feel that side street parking is still available. Others feel free and easy parking has been a business attraction in Albany compared to other commercial areas. And then another opinion is Parklet should be part of a large plan that includes building parking lots and improving public transit. So this is who responded to this survey. As you can see, primarily the businesses that responded are off of Solano Avenue. 47.58% of survey takers have a business on Solano Avenue. So in order to really take a look at who's impacted most, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Plaus, who will look at businesses on Solano Avenue and their impression of the parklets.
Thanks, Brennan. So we kind of took a section of our survey data and just looked at the responses of the businesses that were located on Solano Avenue. And this is specifically for their opinions on a permanent Parklet program, not the temporary one. And so here you can see in the orange section of each column, we have non-restaurant businesses on Solano. And then in blue, we have restaurants on Solano to try and kind of break apart the data and get a sense of what different groups are thinking. And as you can see, overall, there is a majority of support for a permanent program, even in the orange column there, the non-restaurants. It's closer to 50-50, but it is a majority. So 59% of all of the Solano businesses support a permanent program and 57% of non-restaurants. As you can see, it's lower than we see in the larger group of all businesses or in the community survey, but again, still a majority. Next slide, please. And then we also wanted to break it down even smaller and look specifically in that area that Brennan mentioned between San Pablo and Evelyn Street, where there's really kind of this larger group of parklets all kind of in a concentrated area to get a sense of how a concentration of parklets, a large number, was affecting the businesses there. So this is a map, again, of San Pablo to Evelyn. And you can see that there are quite a few parklets in here. Those are in yellow. And then in orange, we have businesses that have sidewalk seating. So not parklets in the actual parking spaces on the street, but tables along the sidewalk. And then the two in blue are restaurants that don't have any kind of outdoor seating. So the majority of the restaurants in that area do have some sort of outdoor seating. And then in purple here, we have the other businesses nearby. So you can see for each block face, there's about 1 parklet to 5 businesses or so. And for each block, we have about 2 parklets. That's sort of the maximum concentration we have at the moment. Next slide. So we took the survey data of just those businesses who responded, who are in that section on the map that I just showed you a second ago, to see how they thought about a permanent parklet program and how much support there was. And again, it's split here. So orange is that whole group. And then in blue, we have just the non-restaurants in that section of Solano. And again, you can see that there is a pretty significant amount of support for a permanent program. 63% just of those non-restaurants there are supportive of a permanent program, which is actually higher than the all Solano non-restaurant number, slightly. So again, not a huge majority, but a majority in support. And especially when we look at all of the businesses in that area, you can see especially the strongly support bar there in the orange is pretty high. I'll also just note that in that section of Solano, parklets are currently occupying 22% of those parking spaces on the street. Next slide. And then this is just a summary of the kinds of comments that we received from those businesses on Lower Solano, the different sections that allowed them to give feedback. The pros that were listed was that the parklets were great for business. We heard that from restaurants and non-restaurants. Some of the non-restaurants thought that it was creating a really nice atmosphere and was drawing people to Solano and kind of making them spend more time around their businesses. And then we also heard from some people that they're still doing a lot of business online even though they're on Solano, because of the pandemic or whatever other reasons. And so they're not concerned about parking in particular. On the flip side, we heard from some people that they were concerned about the lack of parking and the parking being taken up by these parklets. And we also heard about some concerns about obstructed sidewalks and that making it more difficult for people to get to and from various businesses. We also heard a lot about safety concerns. Brennan went over a lot of the main points of those, but those were repeated here. And then the same concerns that came up earlier also about privatization and the kind of equity about public spaces and private use. There were people that brought up ideas about multi-use spaces or some sort of public option that allowed private entities to use the space but not have the entire control of it. Next slide. And then we also took a look at some of the thoughts about the concentration of parklets in the community survey. So this is a summary of the comments we received on that concentration feedback section of the community survey. The majority, a little over 50% of the respondents said that they either didn't have any concern about the concentration on Lower Solano or that they actually wanted more parklets. Got a lot of more the merrier type comments. And then we also had about 25% of respondents saying that they wanted some kind of limit on concentration. So, the main suggestions we heard were having 1 or 2 parklets per block, so limiting it by block, regulating the number of open parking spaces between each parklet. So, for instance, 1 parklet and then 10 or 15 open parking spaces before the next one. And then we also had some comments about maybe doing some sort of proportional limit. So maybe 10% of the parking spaces could be used up for parklets on a given block or something to that effect. We also had about 15% of people that were just generally opposed to the whole program and wanted 0 concentration, no more parklets. And then a small number that had some sort of alternative option like shared parklets or resizing them or something to that effect. Next slide, please. And then to dig a little bit more into the parking question, this is a look at the community survey and specifically the groups that only ever drive to Solano or only ever use active transit, walking or biking. As we said before, most people are doing a whole mix of things. They're walking, driving, biking, sometimes using public transit. But we did break it out just to these different groups to see how it affected the time that they were spending on Solano. So as you can see in purple, the active transit users are spending a lot more time on Solano Avenue, significantly more than the average, and very few of them are spending less time. Now, for those who are only driving to Solano, that's in blue, and you can see that it's a smaller number. It's only about 15% of the total respondents. And they are generally spending a little bit more time on Solano, but it's much more even, right? Most of them are actually saying no change, and there's a larger proportion that say they spend less time on Solano. So it's a little bit more of an even split there. And we'll also note that the people who are spending less time on Solano, of course, are less likely to respond to the survey. We know that, it's not a scientific sample, but at least it kind of gives us a sense of scale. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff Bond, the Community Development Director, who will tell you a little bit more about parking on Solano right now.
Right. Thank you, Michelle. Good afternoon, everyone. Jeff Bond, the Community Development Director. What I'd like to do is just highlight for you some of the results of parking surveys that we've been doing. So ever since this program began back in 2020, we've been doing periodic parking surveys. We do those in conditions that are as normal as we can get these days. So normal weather conditions, no major construction things going on the street, and to the degree it's applicable, school in session, all the kind of normal situations, so that we can get a picture of what's going on with parking. The other thing I mentioned is that in the parking analysis world, 85% is considered kind of the threshold where a project, or excuse me, a data feels like it's full, the parking is full. And at above 85%, people start to feel frustrated and start to drive around the block or just decide, oh, I can't find parking, I'm going to keep on going. So we're looking at that 85% level. And as you can see from this table, these are the 3 most recent surveys we've done. We are seeing some occupancy rates at or above 85%, and certainly some getting close to that. Overall, for the street, it's below 85%, but in particular, the lower Solano area, west of the, basically west of Evelyn. This math is done from Masonic, but I think it's clear that it's particularly concentrated west of Evelyn is where the highest parking occupancy is currently right now. Generally, the other portions of the street are less occupied. And the other thing I would note is to kind of high level analysis is that these parking occupancy rates are increasing. I don't have them on this slide, but when we started doing this in early mid 2000s, we were seeing occupancy rates in the 60s, 60%, 65 range. And now you're seeing overall for the street, the high 70%. So parking demand is increasing, and there is kind of a trend for more of an issue here, possibly in the future. And finally, with the next slide, if Brittany, you could, I'm going to also kind of do the wrap up. Is
well, it's just questions.
Oh, okay. Well, I can give a quick summary of next steps, and Brendan and Michelle can add to that if they wish. What we're kind of taking this work in steps, in bites. We're presenting to you what we presented last Thursday to the Transportation Commission, and by the way, we'll continue to do that where we're presenting to basically the same information to both of you. And we're looking forward to getting kind of different perspectives on different reactions to this information. We're going to use the feedback from the surveys that we got and other public engagement, and both other meetings in the past, as well as the one-on-one contacts we're having with businesses. We're going to be looking at what other cities are doing. A lot of cities are wrestling with these same issues, and we want to make sure that Albany is competitive with other cities who are doing similar programs, and ultimately develop some draft guidelines and parameters for a more permanent program, and present those draft parameters to the City Council sometime probably later this spring. We don't have a precise set schedule on all this right now, but do stay tuned. We'll be coming back to you and to the Transportation Commission as we progress. And then finally, just acknowledge that one of the things that we realized would be super helpful to businesses is grant funding to help be able to pay for upgrading their installations, outdoor dining installations. And we'll be exploring that with various funding sources that are available to us. As Brendan mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we'll be doing that with this program in mind in particular. So with that, I think we're all prepared to respond to any questions you might have, and follow your lead on this. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Fabulous presentation. I as somebody who has surveyed the businesses and residents, it's great to get that many responses. I know you guys are really hard on that, so kudos to you for all that. I will now open it up to the committee for questions. Do you have any clarifying questions for staff here? And I see Member Moss has his hand up.
Thanks. So the first question I have is a kind of a general one. This is a great survey. It to my mind, it does reflect what people generally think about this, but is there any other data to back up any of these opinions? People are saying they're spending more time or money on Solano Avenue. Do we see any increase in tax revenue, or is it too early to get that? There's concerns about safety. Do we see any increase in accidents? Is there anything happening that would make us think, if we looked at the statistics, that things are less safe because of these? parklets.
One thing I could say in regard to the data, so we don't have any additional, I mean, we could look at the tax revenue. The thing that we would have to compare it to is essentially the 2019 numbers before the pandemic, but we're not through the pandemic yet. So it's hard to get a true assessment of the impact in the long term after the pandemic because we're just still in it.
Right.
Jeff, do you have an answer on the accidents, or do you think we could find it at some point? Or
I'm not aware of any significant incidents in Albany. We're certainly sensitive to that, and we hope there won't be. There have been in other cities. I know that. And so we do, if these are going to be permanent, we feel like we need to take some safety measures to help protect the people using the installations. And that's a big part of what we're looking into.
I can add in terms of, I've seen some of our collision data, and it was also kind of weird because of COVID, but overall is pretty steady with years previous if you kind of take out March and some of those other funny months. But that was only injury collisions, so it might be missing some of the data.
Have we done any checks on how fast people are driving? I mean, the idea that these might be actually slowing cars down on Solano Avenue, is there any evidence of that one way or another?
I'm glad you asked that question. I should have mentioned we're doing a speed survey right now on Solano Avenue. And in kind of in the transportation world, the theory is that, yes, something like this does, because it narrows the road, makes the road feel a little tighter. There's a kind of behavioral response of slowing down. So if anything, the theory is we should be seeing slower speeds. In general, we'll get the data and be able to assess that a little bit better. It's of course, kind of the out of control car that we would worry most about, and we fortunately haven't had that problem yet that I'm aware of that led to an incident that came back to us.
Okay, and one final question for now, for me anyway. You said that the parking surveys are showing that it's getting more popular, or there's fewer spaces, the parking's more filled up. But it also said in this that we've taken away 22% of the parking spaces. So doesn't that make sense that the parking spaces that exist and people are still driving down there would be more filled up?
So the denominator in the parking survey is the number of spaces that are available net of what's being occupied by the installations themselves. So yeah, it does make some sense that it would be a little bit tighter than it would have been in 2019 or something like that. Right.
So I mean, how do we know there's any real increase in people driving to Solano Avenue? It seems to me maybe there isn't.
Compared to pre-pandemic conditions, you're right.
Yeah.
These particular surveys that I've been comparing are just watching the evolution of the pandemic itself. I noticed our colleague Justin Freed, transportation manager, popped up. Justin, did you have anything you wanted to add about the speeds part of this?
No, I was just going to report on the traffic surveys underway, but you already mentioned it.
Oh, okay.
Available to answer other questions.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I see Member Carlton has a hand up.
I had a question on the parking survey that you did as well. It looks like you just looked at parking along Solano. Was there any sort of consideration, or will there be any sort of consideration for the side streets? Because I think there's a lot of street parking available on the sides, not necessarily on Solano, and has that also been impacted? Right,
you're correct. We only looked at the on-street spots on Solano, and we would assume that there's more. Well, it kind of depends, because from a business perspective, there might be, for the people coming to Solano Avenue for business-related things, there may be more more vacant spaces, but more people staying at home, working from home might result in more kind of residential occupancy of parking rather than commercial occupancy of parking, if that makes sense. But the short answer is no, we didn't look at the side streets.
Okay. Thank you.
Team member Hanson Romero.
I had to mute myself. So yeah, actually, Jeff, and what you just mentioned, based upon another presentation that we saw, heard from months ago, as far as more people working from home, and therefore that might be part of the reason that in this survey we're seeing more people walking to Solano as opposed to driving to Solano, because if they're working from home, then they're probably, going to walk down versus hopping in their car and driving. I'm also curious about, some of garnering more information from people who do drive in from other cities, because the survey was more so focused on people who are here in Albany or businesses that are here in Albany. But what about some of the visitors that maybe we have not been able to tap into their feedback?
Brendan or Michelle, I think you have a little bit of information on people who are from outside of Albany. Is that right?
Yeah, we did see that. I think it was about 15% of the respondents were from outside of Albany, either visiting to shop or to work. So we know that we were able to get at least a slice of that population. And we think that's probably from advertising on the street itself.
Okay, Member Chasty, please.
The survey, is there any way for us to gauge the percentage of people that are patronizing Solano as how far away they are versus those who are local? I mean, it's obvious that the survey was dominated by people who live locally in Albany, or even more concentrated by people who are closer to Solano. But does that tell us anything about what percentage of people who are using or patronizing the shops and restaurants are from further away? Do we have any information on that?
Yeah, I can say that of those people, the 15% that I said were from outside of the city, the majority of them did walk or bike to Solano. There was about the same percentage that were only driving to Solano, between people that lived in the city and outside. So what that tells me is that even those who lived outside of the city are mostly nearby in Berkeley or El Cerrito, and are coming in, with active transit. And among the people that were driving, there were some that were coming from farther away. There were also some who just weren't particularly mobile. And so they lived pretty close by, either in the city or somewhere nearby outside of the city, and were driving into Solano.
But we don't have any information as to the percentage of people who are patronizing Solano shops and businesses who come from further away.
Not through this survey.
Through any other source of information.
I mean, we wouldn't have that information. I know that there's data companies that can provide that, but we don't have that information.
Yeah. So, I mean, I filled out the survey, but I'm like triple Solano. I'm within the block. I'm on the Solano. I own a business. I own a building. It's like I live here. But it seems to me that people who are further away would never bothered or wouldn't have had the contact enough really to fill out the survey. So the survey seems to be dominated. And I speak in favor of the parklets. I think they're a good idea. I think that the suggestions for improving them, making them safer, are important. But I think we have a longer term issue regarding dealing with, if we're going to draw from outside, how we're going to do that. And I think I'm in favor of making non-vehicular access an important thing, and moving the society away from transportation. But that's car oriented. But by the same token, I think our focus, if we're going to draw from beyond just Solano from a business point of view, we do need to be able to deal with the issue of parking. I think it was interesting to hear Jeff's comment about denominators. You know, that we are dealing with the parking that we have, and if it does mean that as we get more active and it appears that the masks and the stay at home and the discouraging of people from gathering is going to get less and less as we move forward. It seems like we're moving both locally and statewide and even nationally now. There are more voices to talking about. The solution to this may be just complete immersion and hope for herd immunity, because we've gotten the penetration we hoped for with vaccinations, and we're now at the point where we are resigned to the fact that we'll have new versions of this virus that we'll have less protection from with the vaccinations, and even faster spreading ones, that it seems that we'll be back to, I don't want to call it normal, but the new normal. So people will be taking less precautions or fewer precautions and still gathering. And so there'll be a point at which you're looking to figure out what can survive. The thing that I think is favorable about the parklets, not that it increased the revenue for the city of Albany. I'm positive if you go through the taxes, Solano is not the biggest source of income for the city anyway. And with the parklets, what they've managed to do is to prevent a complete collapse. I think that's their most important value, was that they gave life back to the street, and they allowed people who were willing to do it to have an outdoor venue so that they could actually still participate and do this during the more risky times. But where we are now is, if we're looking toward the future, I think we need to be both active in seeking people to come to.
So Member Chase, do you want to hold your comments for when we do discussion and maybe hear any other questions answered and maybe hear from the public, or do you just want to go ahead and complete your thoughts?
If you're the chair, I'm happy to hold.
Okay, very good. Did you have any additional questions for staff?
No, I posed my question.
Okay.
One thing I'll just add to Member JC's statement is, of course, with these surveys, there's no perfect way to implement a survey, and the specific data results, wouldn't necessarily be entirely accurate, especially when considering the broader community outside of Albany. The major things I would say to draw from the survey are the qualitative, impressions, what the ideas are in terms of safety, what ideas are in terms of design, and what the primary concerns are for the community. And that's what the EDC is going to be looking at and assessing and providing feedback to staff on.
So let me just then finish it. First, I thought you did a good job with the survey. You got a lot of results, and pleased to see that. What it did seem to me that likely the survey was bicycle friendly heavy in terms of its participants and people who responded. And the second part is that I think that in terms of using the survey, we need to deal more effectively with the issue of parking in the future if we're expecting Solano to actually come back to thrive.
All right, thank you very much. Member Moss, I see your hand. I would just, before I go to Member Moss, I just want to point out that already in this discussion, there have been several questions that would have been handily answered by the Buxton service that we've been talking about so it has a real role in city planning. Just going to throw that out there for whatever it's worth, and then we're going to go right on to Member Moss for more questions.
A question that came up while we're talking about parking here. The times that you looked at parking were lunchtime. Was there any thought to expanding to dinner time? A lot of the big activity particularly on the bottom of Solano, is at restaurants around dinner time. Do we have any idea how parking is affected at that point?
Thank you for the question. We probably late 2020, early 2021, did do some mid-afternoon and some evening surveys. Haven't done that recently. It's been a little challenging to get good days to do this anyhow, just because weather conditions we had in December. It's a good point. The lunch hour was selected because we thought that would be the most, have the most impact on other businesses. And that would, presumably be open during the lunch hour, where that may not be such an issue in the evening. But I appreciate your question, and as we progress, we can get some surveys in the evenings and mid mornings or mid afternoons, just to kind of see the pattern over the course of the day.
But one last kind of question, comment. As I recall, the general plan from whenever it was in the 90s, one of the goals was to build a parking lot. That got dropped the last time we did a overall general plan, but seems like it just keeps coming back up. All right, that's more of a comment, so I'll save other comments for later.
I try to run a tight ship here. All right.
Okay.
Any other, I think that most of the items that I had have been at least discussed a little bit. Concerned about quality of the data. It's a self-selected sample, so that there's, a large chunk of salt to be taken with this. I'm pretty sure, as was suggested, it was pretty aggressively promoted to certain populations. But the other question, I think, again, Jeff also kind of touched on, and I'm pretty sure the answer is I don't know, which is, when do you think this kind of final decision will be kind of made? Are you thinking fall or?
I would hope sooner than that. It's hard to predict because we're balancing this with a lot of other initiatives and kind of fitting it into commission and committee agendas as they ebb and flow, and city council agendas. The sooner the better. I think from our perspective, the sooner the better that we get a long-term program set up and rolling.
Very good. All right. I see Member Chasey said, Member Moss, is your hand up again, or did it not go down from last time? Okay. Member Chasey's hand went up there. Pretty sure.
Yeah. Is there going to be some effort to bring in design review on these parklets?
We haven't reached any conclusions about that, and want to look at what other cities are doing. There's pros and cons. They certainly want them. We could set up design standards, and what that review process might be, we'd have to think through a little bit. And I think there's some policy decisions that we would want to get your recommendation on. We don't want to make this a super bureaucratic thing. But on the other hand, we want them to look good, and we want people to feel like they have input into what they look like. So we're going to, again, try to be competitive with what other cities are doing, so that our businesses don't have to jump through over a higher hurdle than anybody else. We'll probably, the next time we come back to you, we'll have some more substance on that to answer that question.
All right. Any other questions from the committee before we go to public comment? Seeing none, I see a couple hands up from the public, so we invite you to join us and share your.
We'll start with Nick Pilch.
Thank you, committee. Thank you for taking my comments. Going to start a little bit backwards from the comments I heard from the commission. I very much support the chair's advocacy for the Buxton service. I talk to those people, and they do have a lot of data, and I think you want to always work from data. And speaking of which, Member Chasey claimed that the survey was bicycle heavy. I'm not sure where the data is he has for that claim, but I would say it's probably car heavy. I'll just make that claim myself. I'll say that although the staff is quick to say that there's a lot of caveats around this data, it's overwhelming that people want the parklets. And as one member themselves said, that it has saved the businesses. And I also think it has showed the public and the businesses the benefit of this sort of service, and how people really want it, and how it really helps to form a sense of community in the city. And so I'm glad that the results of the survey correspond with what I feel intuitively, which is when I go down the street driving or bicycling or walking, I feel like it's a party. I feel like it's really a place that I want to be and lots of other people want to be. It feels great. I think, you're seeing people claim, or the survey says that, or people say in the survey that it slowed down traffic. I think that's true. There's data to show that when you have a narrow street, the traffic is slower, so that's a good thing. Let's see, probably a lot else I could say. I'll address parking for one. It doesn't seem to be a huge amount of parking issue, but if you want to manage parking, and the city can manage parking by having parking meters. That's how all the big boys and girls do it, if you will. They actually have a program that charges for parking so that the spaces rotate, and that's how you make sure you always have parking spaces. And let's see, there's one more thing I wanted to say. I am concerned that the city would spend a lot of time on improving the safety of the parklets. Of course, safety is important, and we want to make sure people are safe in the parklets. But if you look at where people are the safest or the least safe, I think the statistic will show that the least safe activity is driving. That's where most people die. So don't spend a lot of time and money on making the parklets bulletproof, else we might all just go in concrete bunkers and spend our rest of the time there. That's where we'll be totally safe. So thank you for taking my comments tonight.
Wow, that was an experienced speaker, 3 minutes on the dot. All right, we have another speaker from the public.
Sorry, just one moment. Jeremiah Pinguela.
Hi, good evening, Jeremiah. Sorry about the alarm in the background. Yeah, we're talking about this important things. Let me mute my mic real quick. Just 1 second.
Hopefully he's not on Solano Avenue right now, because we don't want.
Oh, sorry about that. Thank you. It was an accident. These parklets on Solano, nothing's really permanent. I know we're talking about permanent parklets, but I found this has been a great pilot program. It's just not perfected yet. I've mentioned before that the big bush on the crosswalk, if you're heading west down Solano in front of Tacos and Beers, they've got this really big bush, on the corner. And it's really hard to see little kids or, gosh, a wheelchair, an ADA person. You can't see someone behind that bush, everybody. So if we're going to do this, we got to do it right. We got to do it safe. I've sent emails and voicemails to city staff, the city hall, so many times about this bush, and it's still there. So to me, it seems like you guys don't care about safety. The bush is still there, So we got to fix the problems we have first before we try to take on new things. And my issue is it's a public space. It's a parking space. It's zoned as parking. It's not zoned as eating food. I'm a longshoreman at the Port of Oakland, okay? I'm around big trucks and big equipment all day. And I know what transportation is. And this is not safe. If we're going to do this permanently, we need K-rails. We need cement K-rails to border off each parklet if it's going to be in the middle of the street. So that way, if a car or a bus accidentally runs into people eating food, well, the cement K-rail will stop a car. What do you guys got right now to stop cars? What have you all approved for safety? What, an empty orange plastic container that's supposed to be filled with water? That's not filled with water? You know, all these barrels. It's just so unsafe, you guys. So if you're gonna do it right, do it safe. We need K-rails and cones and high visibilities and more 15-mile-an-hour signs and more crossing guards. Have you seen everybody on these crossing?
So you're over your time.
Okay, thanks, Brendan. Good to see you. I'm glad you're still with Albany.
Thank you, Jeremiah. All right. We can now, let's see. I see another hand now, Very good.
This is Veronica Davidson.
I'll be really, really quick. Thank you all for considering this. Really appreciate all the thought that's going into it. I just want to double check and make sure that we keep our focus. This is the Economic Development Committee, not the Traffic and Safety Commission. So I want to make sure that when we're talking about safety, we really think about whose wheelhouse is which. And so this committee, my understanding is to make sure that we are worrying about the economic development of our city. And I think that the statistics were pretty clear in that survey. However it goes with people from one area or another filling it in. A lot of us who live within a block of Solano, myself included, or our business owners, myself also included, also shop at those businesses, and we are part of keeping it afloat. So I think it's important to hear from us. Of course, we'd love to hear from further out, but as this committee, if we want to work on that, let's work on advertising for our district further out first, and then we can try and get their responses. I also know that businesses can collect data of who's coming from further away from their own credit card companies. So you could ask businesses for that. And just one other quick note, I went back through my business emails, and I'm not sure that somehow from the business license survey that every business is in that email list. So I just think we should double check and make sure that we're really getting all those people when we do these surveys. But I really appreciate that you guys are considering this, and I'd love to hear the conversation around how this is economically supporting our city and our businesses. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for comments. Any others? I'm not seeing any, so we can bring it back to the committee for discussion. So who would like to start us off here? Not seeing anyone.
Well, if nobody else wants to start, I'll go back and just finish my comments, if that's okay.
Very good. Please do.
So, as I said, I think the parklets, in fact, have been helpful. As I mentioned earlier, I think that they were part of what prevented the collapse of the business district on Solano. And I think they do add an element of vitality to our downtown. So in that sense, and in solving the problem of where to go when you're concerned about whether you can eat on Solano, they give you an outdoor option that makes it safer. In that sense, I think they've been very helpful, and we should do what we can to be able to allow them to stay. I would be in favor of some kind of design review. I agree with Jeff, not to make it more difficult. That would be problematic. But because we use diagonal parking for most of Solano, it makes them look weird, and there's useless space in part of it, so there might be a way to at least address that part of it. I've long been a proponent of something more safe. I think that portable Jersey walls could be brought in very reasonably and inexpensively and sunk temporarily into the street, and that would resolve the problem. You can make them prettier doing a lot of other things around that, but having a basic barrier, because it's not a question of just public safety and whether or not we're acting as planning and zoning, which I respect the comment of the last speaker that it is our job to deal with the economics. But the city is setting itself up for liability if it allows for the creation of eating venues on the street that have zero protection. And sooner or later, I mean, I've handled quite a few cases over the thousands of years I've been a lawyer of dealing with people who've been hit even people who have been hit on Solano while eating in a restaurant that's in a building on Solano. So it's an issue, and if it does happen, it will be tragic. So we should at least head that off. About the parking part, if we hope to have Solano be able to be a draw, we do need to be able to accept that there will be people coming from a distance. And, I was happy to see, in fact, that in the survey, the vast majority of people who responded seem to favor walking and do come to Solano walking. It was interesting to see that was the most common way people get to Solano. So that means that at least the survey respondents are drawing from a very local crowd. But if we are drawing from a distance, we do need to address the parking issue. When Emeryville created its fake downtown, that fake Main Street that it did, the first thing it did was provide parking. And it instantly allowed people to become comfortable heading to Emeryville, knowing that they could find the parking they wanted and do what they wanted to do there. And it allowed Emeryville to bootstrap itself from almost nothing to a very viable venue for businesses. We need to be able to address that issue. I'll follow up on Pete's comment about the centralized parking structure. That was something that we had talked about a number of times, and I think it's still a way to help solve the problem. You can lose a lot of spots on Solano if you can have a parking structure that will allow people to park a car and then get out and walk. And also, we could make the parking structure more friendly to electric vehicles, which is a critical part of how we should deal with easing people away from polluting engines to being able to get around without polluting. And I think it takes the pressure off the issue of cars against bikes and all of that sort of stuff. And by the way, if Nick's still listening, my comment about the bikes, I love the idea. I purchased a bicycle parking stanchion thing in front of my building. I encourage bicycles. I think it's great. It's a wonderful thing, but not everybody can do it. And if you're coming from El Sobrante or Vallejo or from Hayward or someplace else to buy some of the specialty items on Solano, you're not coming by bicycle. So anyway, I think I'll stop with that.
All right, thank you very much. Member Moss, I believe you're.
Thank you, Todd. Some general comments. I found the survey interesting. It kind of, although given the issues around who responded and maybe didn't respond or was able to respond, I take it with a more than a few grains of salt. But I think it generally shows that people, I took off my video here. There we go. I think it just generally shows that people really like to be outside in safe, well-lit areas. And I think anyone that's done any, say, traveling to Europe or other places around the planet, realize that. And I think a lot of Albany is, kind of realized it when they were presented with an area that they could go and see other people, feel safe, and it was well lit. Of course, we have to do all sorts of things if we're going to redesign our main commercial area, issues around safety, design, transportation for public transportation, deliveries, whatever. When we start diminishing the number of cars on Solano Avenue by also diminishing parking, it makes it more complicated. And it's going to be a burden on staff, I'm sure, but I think it's worth the burden. I think we have the potential for creating a much more interesting, lively area to eat or shop. One thing that occurs to me that when we do this, we're probably going to change the nature of the commercial space on Solano Avenue. This kind of thing, I think, favors restaurants, which is okay. We go out and eat whenever we can in this household, or get takeout in the last 2 years. but then it kind of shifts the design, I think, of what works on Solano Avenue. The retail and other things that are more auxiliary to that kind of restaurant experience will be in favor. Other things maybe not so much. So this idea that, yeah, we probably do need a parking lot, as much as many of us thought this was something that could fall off the general plan. It's probably something, if we are going to start taking away parking on Solano Avenue, we should be exploring ways that we might replace that in a more concentrated parking place. So when people come and want to buy something and they live out of community, they can do it. But, from my talking with people in Kensington or Berkeley that I know, or El Cerrito, everybody seems pretty favorable that I've talked to that has to drive to Solano Avenue to use it. So I think we've started a creation of a space that will draw people, even if there's not easy parking for them. And it'll be, as is seen, particularly popular with people in town. So, I know there's a lot of stuff that'll have to happen to make these parklets permanent, and it'll have to go through many commissions and committees for different opinions on how this is all going to work. But I think in the end, it'll be worth it. It'll really create a potential space that everyone's going to be pretty much happy with.
All right, thank you very much. Member Green, I believe you.
Thank you. So I just wanted to say, how I read that report, there really isn't a parking problem, and non-restaurants were very happy with what's going on Solano with parklets and 22% less parking. So I don't know if I read it differently or, but it just, in that grid, only 2 squares of all of the times that it was surveyed were at the saturation point. And so it seems like, having taken away 22% of the parking spots, the vast majority of people are really happy with how things are working with the parklets, including, very importantly, non-restaurants. So I don't know, I just wanted to say that because I felt like somehow the conversation moved from what the report is showing. So I just felt like I needed to say that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Hansel.
In that grid, that same thing as well. However, I think it's a continued deterioration in the fact that, as we reemerge and, it may become more of an issue. I will say, due to a small fire, I'm currently living in Emeryville right now at a hotel. But I've noticed on my to and from Albany by car, Emeryville is adding more parking structures. They're building a huge parking structure down near a lot of these shops and all of these businesses here. And I think it's to specifically support more activity, more business in this area. I do know that SAA in the past has done several surveys during some of our events and everything. And it shows that a lot of our business draw comes from Contra Costa area. So we do actually get quite a bit of shoppers coming from the Contra Costa area coming into Albany. Also wanted to note that one of my concerns with the parklets as well is how are they impacting deliveries for some of our businesses who depend on the delivery trucks to come and bring more goods to them. Is that having a negative impact one of the questions that I kind of have for that. And then also, I noticed in the survey that buses were actually the least used. It seemed like a very, very fragmented, walking, biking, car, but buses were used the very least. And it was really a small sliver. Yet we've got 2 bus parklets just below Masonic. So I'm curious to find out more around that as well. So those are some of my comments.
I would just jump in real quick and point out that AC Transit has had reduced service, so that could be part of it, and they're restoring now, but it has been reduced. But anyway, on to Member Chase.
I'll defer to anybody who hasn't spoken yet.
Member Carlton.
I guess I wanted to. I hate the fact that we do have so much of our conversation around parking, and we have talked before. I do understand that some people have limited mobility issues, and some people do come from further away where they don't have the option to walk or to bike. I do think that having some sort of off, parking lots, maybe there's businesses who have parking lots who aren't open in the evenings, and maybe doing some sort of work with them to get some sort of off-street parking within Albany might be an option rather than building a whole parking structure. Maybe that's not enough. Maybe that's short-sighted. But I also think we've talked a little bit about, alternate parking or alternate transportation options. Member Hanson Romero mentioned, the bus services. We do have 2 good buses. I do think that at this point in time that people riding the bus and people riding the BART are a little bit more limited because of pandemic, because of, just the nature of this crazy last 2 years, but that will come back. So I think, buses is a good option. Before pandemic, we used to see a lot of people going, using the bus service. So I'd expect that to come back. But also maybe around BART, we've talked before too about maybe getting some signage and encouraging people to use other forms of transportation to get in and out of Albany. And just wondering if I don't know how you would do a survey around that, but, something to kind of get us away from the car-centric option, that there are many other options to get to, the Albany area rather than driving if you are not within walking or biking distance.
And we have another issue that Buxton would be very helpful in answering. Another question. They could tell us exactly how people get here.
Exactly.
Member Chasty, it's you or Member Moss who's also spoken before. So we'll go to you.
All right. I didn't bring this up before, but after listening to the comments, I think it's germane to the discussion. There is a proposal for a building on the corner of Ordway and Solano, which is right next door to me. It's a proposal to build a 50-foot high or 49 feet high building. It's got it's got a 5,000 square foot lot. It's almost 100% penetration of the lot, use of the lot. There's a little bit of side yard and backyard, but almost none. And it comes with 3,000 square feet of dental office. They're not proposing any parking for it. And it comes with 12 units of housing, and they're not proposing any parking for it. So we're asking for a waiver of all the side yard setbacks and the height limitations rather. And they're also asking for a waiver of all parking except for 2 spaces. The justification for this is that it comes in under SB 10, SB 9, and I think, forget the other one, it's something about 303. I forget the numbers. But anyway, the legislation has gradually, and from Sacramento, has gradually crimped the ability of local governments to have much to say if you're dealing with housing. In this case, since they're seeking 12 units and they're seeking such waivers from that, one thing the city might be able to do is eliminate the dental office entirely, because there's no justification for any.
I do feel like this has gone to a different.
Yeah, Member Chasey, noticing the time, I'd like to ask you to tie it back now to the
I am.
Very well, very good.
Yeah, but it has to, I mean, in order to be able to tie it back, I think you need to understand the full implications of it. So
we have 40 minutes left, so I might have to move on to
the point is we're talking about the future of Solano. And this is now, these kinds of buildings would be, or possibly would be, justified under the brand new state laws that have taken place, many of them this January, some of them a year or so before. So because of this and other changes in state law, you could be facing 20, 30, 40 applications for one-story buildings to become 50-story building, 50-foot buildings with no parking if you are allowing for certain exemptions regarding the type of housing. So if you add some low-income housing, you get extra boosts. And I'm not against the idea of density of housing on San Pablo and Solano Avenue, but we're talking about parking in a way that may not be what's going to be parking in the near future for Solano.
I think what I'm getting from your comment is that we need to be very careful what we do now because we may have even less control in the future, and that there might be more demands on street parking being made than we're anticipating right now.
Well, way
Member
more.
Moss? Yeah, way more. Significant, way more. Yeah, they're very
like
very
27 exemptions for a 50-foot building.
That's right. Member Moss.
Okay, I was just going to add something again on parking, but this is for Jennifer's comment on parking in Emeryville. Only because my wife has designed one of the parking structures in Emeryville and was involved with that. A lot of the parking they're building in Emeryville isn't for consumer shopping so much, but there's been a big influx of tech and biotech and hospital stuff. And so it's more for workers coming into Emeryville that some of those lots are going up, at least as my understanding is. My final thought on parking is if we are going down the route of losing parking places, if we take a few out of the parklets, I don't think it's going to make a big difference on the overall parking picture in the future. But I think it can make a big difference on the ambiance of Solano Avenue and the kind of lively scene that would bring people here. And if they come from far away, parking is not going to discourage them. I think I see only upsides for most of the businesses on Solano Avenue.
All right, thank you. Any other? I do have a few comments myself. I just thought, folks. So I just want to start by saying I do like the parklets. I've supported them all along. From the beginning, I was never happy with the way they were so kind of recklessly thrown into the street, kind of ahead of any sort of city policy before the city could get a policy forward. And that has led to all sorts of problems. Our concerns, many of the problems have been addressed, but some continue today. I mean, blatant safety issues happening right now as we speak. As it is, if we just kind of waved our hand and made these all permanent, that'd be disaster. These are not ready for that. And what's happened is we've let our standards slide, right? We didn't have any standards. And when we have had standards, they haven't been well enforced because of pandemic. There's all kinds of reasons. But anybody who's managed people knows that if you let your standards slide, it's a whole lot harder to pull them up than it is to just maintain them. And we've let them slide. So many of the things we're going to have to do are going to seem unfair, but that's because we did it to ourselves, because we never required these things to happen from the beginning, which if we'd been able to develop a program and get them out in an orderly fashion, we wouldn't have these issues we're facing now. But we need to keep in mind, it is appropriate for us to talk about safety and parking. We are being asked to reflect on the concerns of the business community. The business community is concerned about safety of their customers and things. It's completely appropriate for us to do that. We need to be concerned about safety. We need to be concerned about fairness. And we need to be concerned about this sustainability as a program. And that's why I think it's so important that we do charge a fee. that there is some, perhaps based on square footage or something, to generate a little revenue so the city can have some funds to enforce those standards. Perhaps, I dream of a parking garage. That would be so liberating for this city. There's so many things that would open up if we had a parking garage, but I'm not sure how likely that is in the future. Ideally, the parklets would be held to the same standards as our existing parklet program, like they are in Berkeley. The Berkeley parklets are built to a much higher standard than the ones in Albany. They're accessible, they're safe, they meet their standards. But I think that's a lot to ask. I mean, the House office parklet was like $80,000. We're not going to expect that from all of our parklets. But we do need to develop standards that meet accessibility standards, meet sanitation standards, safety standards. I think that there should be a permit that's renewed annually and with the parklet inspected annually, just like a health permit. You want to have your, dining outdoors, you need to maintain your business. For fairness, I really think, I pushed for this at the beginning, and again, we never got a program developed, but I think that making a parklet permanent requires, approval from your neighbors. Not everybody on the street, but your neighbors that are directly impacted. Imagine how galling it must be to be frustrated that the parklet next to you, which is only open during the day, is blocking your delivery access and blocking your customer access. And it's just sitting there vacant. Even when the business is open, it's often vacant. That must be very aggravating. So I think that needs some sort of approval or check-in from the neighboring businesses. A lot of these things were not issues during the pandemic, but you know what? We're not talking about the pandemic anymore. We're talking about permanent. We have to, we're moving away from the pandemic back to whatever. And so we can't have this cavalier rogue tone or rogue attitude that we've had through the pandemic, because we're talking about permanent now. We're talking about changing the character of certainly blocks of Solano Avenue, certainly portions of Solano Avenue, I think Member Moss was saying. And that's fine, but we need to keep that in mind. Solano Avenue has survived for many decades as a utility district. It does have dining, but it also has dentists, and it has financial planners, and has all these other sorts of businesses. And we're kind of taking a step away from that, at least on the most affected blocks. I think there should be a limit on maximum square footage, and I think that bulb out space that you should be included in that. It might be that these businesses, they have a huge bulb out, they're able to use a lot of it, and then they also take their full portion of parking spaces. Well, maybe they only get part of that, the parking space, and able to use their bulb out space. And that would still have a lively atmosphere, right? We don't have to sacrifice. And then this really isn't relevant now, but it might be in the future. I think any program should only be open for restaurants that are open 8 hours. Like a little brunch place that would be open from like 8 to 2 or something. I'm not sure that would be a good candidate to do one of these in the future. Obviously, it's not something now, but in the future. I think we really need to think very clearly about what's going to happen if a business goes out of business. Does the property owner apply for and perhaps pay for the parklet? Think of the value to the property owner, how much more they can charge on their lease if they know that tenant will be able to use all that extra space outside that they don't have to pay for. So I think that those sorts of issues need to be considered. And that's pretty much, yeah. So that's under, fairness. Consider there should be a limited percentage of parking per block. Yes, it's true that if you look at overall, there wasn't a parking problem, but that 98% at kind of the busiest section is frightening to somebody. I mean, a lot of people, I've had hands waved in my face many times during this whole process. Oh, we don't have a parking problem. Oh, there's no parking problem. And all I can say is that the standards they're using to make that claim are not the same standards as a restaurant owner who's considering moving to Solano Avenue. I can tell you that right now, because we've spoken to restaurant owners who specifically said, I could not move to Solano Avenue before the pandemic because of parking. So I full-throatedly support a parking garage, and I support making the parklets permanent, but I think we need to introduce some standards and develop a program that's going to work for everybody and certainly for the city. So those are my comments. Anybody else have more comments? Just like I got that in there before the noise started behind me. Okay.
Any additional? Just curiosity. So you'd raised some points on equity. Any additional comments on equity in terms of who gets a parklet? I think that it would be good to kind of get your feedback on certain standards.
Member Chasty?
Yeah, you can't make a gift of public resources to an individual. You have to figure out a program that will address that problem. Right now, we're doing it, and nobody seems to be worried about it. I think it was a good thing during the pandemic to allow it to happen. It was a good use of public resources to help save what was happening on Solano. But the point that you can't make this run with the land or give it to a property owner, or there's a lot to be considered there, how you're going to deal with it. The other cities have addressed it, but we definitely need to deal with that.
Thank you. Member Carlton?
Yeah, I guess I would just echo the same thing that I agree. I think that the parklets benefit everybody, not just the restaurants, but obviously they do, just by inherent nature, they are going to benefit the restaurants a little bit more. And I think that some sort of, I don't want to say nominal fee, because obviously it can't be too much to make then the parklets be something beyond most businesses' reach. But, some sort of equitable, something to kind of level the playing field. I think that that's absolutely fair, and absolutely some sort of safety standard needs to be put in. So there again, I just putting some, kind of a wrapper or guardrails around the whole program. I would totally think it's a great idea.
Thank you. Member Moss, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. And I'm sitting here finding it a little curious that yes, there's lots of complex things that we're going to have to talk about, and equity, and it probably is appropriate that businesses that use public space pay into this. But I would also point out that we've never asked car owners to pay for anything as far as parking. They get to go it for free. So, there's a bit of a double standard there that some people get to use it for free, and the businesses have been, but now we're saying, well, businesses should also should need to pay for this. I'm all in favor of paid parking. I agree with the comments that Nick Pilch said earlier that, we have had this tradition of free parking, but it's probably time to look at that. Because if by some rare chance we are able to get some kind of parking structure built, say we work out something with the theater, Albany Theater, and use their lot to build a nice big 3 or 4 story structure, I certainly don't think we're going to build that and then allow free parking in it. So it may be time to look at it at a number of issues like this. And yeah, I think I just keep coming back to this idea. Yes, this is going to have a change on Solano Avenue, but I think it is a positive change. There's a lot of stuff to work out: safety, deliveries, public transit, but it's worth the effort to do it, because I think it's just going to create a much more interesting space that not only our community is in favor of, but also I think some people coming from surrounding communities are going to be drawn to it, even if they have to go park on the other side of Albany Hill in order to eat at a restaurant in downtown. It will be a draw.
I would just say, and this is a concern I've had a long time, we need to be very careful of Albany exceptionalism. There is a lot of competition out there. Shattuck Avenue, Forest Street, there's a lot of places that offer a lot of what we offer, and they all have big parking lots. And so I think we need to be very careful of not going too far in one direction. As special as I think Solano Avenue is, I'm not sure it's so special to hold off a lot of inconvenience to get here. For equity, one thing I would like to see us do right now, as far as equity is concerned, is stop calling this a program for restaurants and retail. I've spoken to a lot of retail operations. I've talked to a lot of other businesses that I thought might be able to use the parking lot, and it doesn't make any sense for them. A retail, they'd have to take stuff out every night and put it away every night. Salons can't do it because there's standards, hygiene standards they have to maintain that they can't do out. So there's all these reasons they can't. We just have to start calling this a restaurant program because it does not really apply to any other business. Just want to be clear that I see that as an equity issue. It's
yeah,
a
but
issue.
I, as I said, I think it will have an influence on what, what other businesses are on Solano Avenue, and they're going to be somewhat more auxiliary. For my mind, Chez Panisse, famous restaurant, home of California cuisine, basically is the reason that a jewelry shop right next to it exists, because that jewelry shop feeds off the clientele that go in there. And so you probably will have a change in retail if we become popular in a certain way. I don't think that's.
Yeah, I'm just saying that they're calling them restaurant or retail parklets, and that's just not accurate. I do think that they support the entire business and help the business. But I just think when we're talking about the parklets specifically, we need to be clear that this isn't some sort of all business thing. This is restaurants, and I just think we need to be clear about that.
Well, it's restaurant, and it creates a very interesting space. It helps it financially, the restaurants, but It also creates a space that people want to come to, and then other businesses can kind of feed off of that.
Of course. No, I agree. I think we'd probably all agree. Yeah. Member Chase?
I was just thinking that we might expand the definition to include chicken and cattle, and these pens would be ideal for farming.
They better be small cattle. All right. Any other? Have you gotten what you need, Brennan? Maybe more than you need?
Yeah, I think so. So just I just want to answer one of the points that you made. So what happens if a business goes out of business? What happens to the parklet? So we had a meeting with Berkeley and talked about their program, and basically what they have is like a sort of a permission to use like space, and if they maintain it, then they get to keep their parklet. If they cannot maintain it, then they have to take it down. So there's a responsibility for them to take down the parklet. So there is a mechanism for that. Also, just wanted to bring up the concept. So Berkeley has three kinds of what I call parklets in this sense. There's the public parklet that's open to anyone. There's the outdoor commerce, which is private space, and that's for the restaurants to use, and that's where alcohol can be served. And then there's sort of a group sort of parklet where multiple businesses can use the space in a shared space. They said that I guess there's one sort of parklet that has the multi-use function. So just wanted to give you some information there.
And then, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
And then also I think we're pretty good on feedback, but any desire for limitations on parklets or just kind of see how things go?
I just want to make one more point about charging for the parklet. Other than generating revenue, it is a source of buy-in from the merchant. So they're more likely to take care of it. I personally believe we wouldn't have a lot of the problems we've run into if we'd been charging a little bit for this, just so that they have a little skin in the game. They're a little committed to it. And I see a member of Trilly hasn't had a chance to speak yet. Welcome.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting discussion. I think I have too much to say about the whole thing. I think that's sort of, plus I have a restaurant background. Really, at the end of the day, I'd like to see it be tightly organized by the city and really structured well for safety and to address all the concerns. The survey was really well done. And if you can address all those issues, then great. But it's a challenge. And I think that we shouldn't be thinking about 6 months. I think we should be thinking about 6 years and sort of institutionalizing this a little bit more and making it real, as they did with House and the other one. I don't think you're ever going to hit equity. I don't think every single block is built equally. So I don't think, and then if it's the restaurants with resources that can build out to code, parklets. So you're not going to check off every box. I think that, you tackle one thing at a time. I love the outdoor feel of it all. But I also think that half the parklets should be thrown in the trash and that they're unsafe. So that's my public comment. I love them, but I hate them too. So, let's see if we can make them better every single year if they're going to stick around. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm glad you could tune in. All right. Other comments before we close this item? Seeing none, we will then move on. Thank you, everybody. Interesting discussion, very valuable. Moving on to a subcommittee report. And I believe I will be presenting this. This is the subcommittee that it's Member Petrilli, Member Carlton, and I met to talk about ways that the city can support business in hiring. We were hearing from all these businesses that it's really hard finding ways to hire people. And so we've come up with some ideas, and I believe Member Petrilli will be presenting. Are we ready?
Sure, yeah, go for it.
Okay, I will share my screen now.
I just want to give a shout out that Linda and Todd did the majority of the work here, and we had a very good discussion about it. We created a PowerPoint presentation, and then we have a survey to review. We'll try to keep it quick because we don't have that much time. We titled this Albany Works, and we'll just start off with slide 2, which is sort of the goals. We wanted to find ways for the city to support businesses in finding employees. I think most of us know that right now it's definitely a workers sort of economy. Employers are having a difficult time recruiting and hiring. And something like November, December, there was the most employees quitting a record in history. So we want to increase local employment for Albany residents. That's always a plus. Decrease open headcounts for Albany businesses, right? Decrease the vacancies. Build connections between the businesses and residential communities. Pretty straightforward goals. I'm sure that we could all add to these goals, but the goal is to get to full employment in Albany, have the best employees, try to keep it local, but also outsource it. So let's go to the discussion. Next slide. Ideas. One of with every everything, information is power. So we really wanted to think about how we would survey businesses and see if they actually are having a difficult time in Albany hiring and recruiting, and who's having the most difficult time. How have they had successes? Have they had failures? What's their current standing? How can we help? What's going to be the most useful to them? That was one idea, which would sort of feed into these other ideas as well, right? If we immediately survey people and find out that people don't know what they're doing, they don't understand that, that Craigslist is no longer the best option for posting ads. They're struggling with interview process and communication with potential candidates. So sort of getting that survey to get some information from the businesses on what their actual needs are and what's critical for them. We thought about, we've had success, and Todd had success with the Mixer, the high school business program for summer jobs, sort of do a community-sponsored social gathering, and then also be able to connect with businesses there. We discussed doing sort of job postings through the city news and or website, and sort of, every single month going to each business and saying, are you looking for jobs? Can we help you post a job? Or creating some sort of system in order to, I got a kid here. Hold on. Todd, you want to take
Okay, no worries. Yeah, just some sort of integration using the power, the reach that the city has in the community to just let folks know when there are openings and that they might be appropriate for them, or somebody they know. That's how networking works. And I would just quickly say the Mix with the School Business Program, we've been doing that for many years. It's a great event, and a lot of people do get summer jobs that way and internships. Obviously not something we're going to do in the midst of a pandemic. We didn't do it last year, and who knows if we'll do it this year, but that's a nice thing. I believe Member Petrilli is still, has his hands full. So social media site for potential employers and employees. This is a bit of a heavier lift, but this would be something kind of a job board and for connections between folks. I mean, realistically, folks are using LinkedIn and existing tools for that, but there might be a place there for something very Albany specific. Workshop and resources to share recommended practices recruiting and hiring in Albany. So this basically grows out of it, and the experience of business people that we interview, that we come up with kind of what is working right now in Albany, what is working with the sort of employees that you are looking for, and present that information. in a way that could be captured and then made available as a resource. We would also want to kind of connect people and leverage the resources of the other local organizations supporting that, the Economic Development Agency, I think, and then post on social media. Recent Berkeley example. I'm not sure. Member Petrilli is back. Very good. Very good. Here we go.
Yeah. So like the day after we met with the subcommittee, the city of Berkeley, I forget what the organization is, but it's like basically the Chamber of Commerce for Berkeley, did a posting on social media and on the website saying, hey, look, we know everyone is struggling to hire. Here's the best practices for posting. Here's, is an example of human resources. It's weird. But they basically posted that on their social media, and I'm sure that was blasted out through their email. But it was about best practices, right? And sharing with employers what is current, what's current, what resources do they have locally and also just nationally or internationally. A lot of smart people are thinking about how to deal with the labor crisis, I guess you could call it right now. But yeah.
And I would just add that a lot of these ideas would involve these other organizations, the Chamber and the SAA and other possible organizations to kind of leverage that connection as well. Member Petrilli, was there more you wanted to say on this?
No, I mean, those are the ideas. It's sort of like getting the community together, surveying the businesses, providing resources, and then somehow potentially, sharing job listings or making a connection between the candidate and the employer, and how can we potentially do that? So
very good. And I would say, as we move to the next slide, we have started on the survey, so we can say a few things about a survey.
So the survey, we'd have to sort of agree upon that this is the best idea, right, to get information. We could look at the survey. Maybe we do that just briefly prior to the discussion part, but understanding what businesses needed. This is an employer-focused survey, which would go out to the local businesses. Todd, could you pull up the survey?
Yeah, I can pull it up right now. Just a moment. I would say I see Member Moss has a hand up. Was there something you wanted to ask right now, or do you want to wait till after?
I can wait, but I can ask right now also. So who, I understand there's a labor shortage in the country as a whole, but do we know, or do you guys have any idea who is needing employees that they're not able to find here in Albany? I mean, you're saying you're going to survey employers, but do you have any sense before this survey goes out who those employers are that are having troubles finding people?
The short answer is no, and that's why we want the survey. We could look at statistics of industry standards, right? So restaurants are looking for, they've seen significant layoffs, education, sort of the childcare. There's a lot of sort of like the core list. When it pertains to Albany, we probably could make some assumptions there just based on the demographics and on the types of businesses that exist here. But short answer is no, and we kind of want to dig into that by doing this survey and seeing what sectors need it, and what types of businesses need it.
And I can say that anecdotally, I've heard from many business owners that this is what they're facing. And to the point that they will come up and mention it to me rather than me having to ask. They will come up and say, man, I'm really having a hard time finding people to hire right now. That is my challenge right now, is finding people to hire. So again, that's anecdote, but I've heard it from more than one, and that is not usual. It is unusual for me to hear the same thing from different people like that, just unsolicited.
Okay. Well, thank you.
And we do have kind of a very rough draft of a survey. We can just go down real quick. You want to read or go through this, member?
Sure. Yeah. Are you currently hiring? Has your business been negatively affected by difficulty in recruiting and or hiring employees? What is the most effective way you have found to find job candidates? Right, word of mouth, Craigslist, so on. Is there a recruiting tool or technique you have tried that was not successful or that was successful? And those are open-ended questions. What has been the biggest challenge for you hiring employees? How do you prefer to contact potential employees that have provided a resume, telephone, email, text, other? We could easily ask a question about like who are the candidates that you were hiring? What's their age demographic or whatever? But we don't really want to get too far into that because you can get into discrimination and things of that nature. Have you ever participated in a job fair or hiring event? That's a probing question to figure out if they'd be interested in it. Your business requires full-time employees. Examples. Did your job candidates require special training or certification? When hiring, you primarily look for long-term, short-term, seasonal, other. Would you be interested in posting your job in a city newsletter or social media outlets, right? So that's gauging whether or not they would want to, because there's a potential that if you post it, you might be frowned upon, right? Because then you look as if you're desperate to hire. I don't want to have that sort of approach from employers. Is there anything else you would like to share about recruiting and or hiring employees in Albany? So, within each one of these questions, you could probably ask 3 or 4 more questions within the same thing. So I think simplifying this and sort of getting to the core of what we're looking for as far as information, so that we can either do a job fair or create some sort of system for them to post, or try to make a connection between the employer and employee. I think that that's what the survey is for. Who would be one question for Brennan is who, if this survey was supported by everyone here, who would it get kicked to as a recommendation to post? The city, or could we do it?
I mean, it just depends. I mean, I know that, you have a member of your subcommittee that is with the Chamber of Commerce. And so that might make sense, except for you had mentioned, I mean, I guess not every business is in the Chamber of Commerce, so it could go through the city potentially. We'd have to look into it, but yeah.
I can use the model of a survey that I did on the Parks, Rec, and Open Space Commission, where we actually performed the survey. I think that we would really want to, hopefully we could leverage the city's business license list, and that an email could go out, or at least the business newsletter, the kind of monthly business newsletter go out, to try to expand the reach and get as far as we can. Because the Chamber and the SA list, I mean, it is what it is, but it's nowhere near the full business population in the city.
Oh. Linda, did we miss anything?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I think you hit the high points. And to what committee member Moss said, we don't really know what the scope is. It may be that there, is a big problem. Maybe there isn't. So I think the survey was just kind of the idea, high level, do we use resources for this? And if so, where do you point them?
All right, I will open it up for other questions. Any questions? Noticing the time, but still encouraging questions. All right, let me open it up. I see we have no more attendees, so I guess we don't need to open. Well, we'll open for public comment. We'll now close for comment. Any other discussion on this issue? Member Chasey again, please.
Yeah, I thought I'm glad you're doing it. I think that getting something up and running would, even before the survey, some place where people who are looking for help can post, and something that would be acknowledged as a Solano Avenue Association, Chamber of Commerce, City combination billboard, if you would be useful. I was really interested in hearing about the city of Berkeley giving best practices. That would be great to post for employers, and we could adapt it to Albany if it's Berkeley centric, but I suspect it would work no matter what. That's great. I'm glad you guys are doing this.
All right, thank you. Member Moss.
I'm sitting here wondering, from what I read about the national situation in terms of finding employees, a lot of it has to do with a lot of people thinking they're just aren't paid enough anymore. Or the work is the compensation is not worth what they're getting in one way or another. I'm wondering if that could be part of the survey, if people are getting any of that kind of feedback, if they put a help wanted sign out and people will come in and say, oh, I'm not going to work for that and walk out. I mean, it's also a bit tied into this whole idea of why we may be building 5-story buildings for more housing in California, because apparently we don't have housing that's affordable. I mean, I know we don't have housing that's very affordable, particularly for a lot of the jobs that need filling. So are there other reasons that, I don't know if it's relative to this survey, or is there any way to kind of look at that also in this? If can we not, are restaurants or other businesses unable to pay employees enough money to want to come to all the work, basically?
One thing,
I'm sorry, go ahead, Brennan.
I just wanted to say, so just to kind of dovetail from that point, I just recently attended a Cal-Ed webinar where it was about employment, recruitment, and retention, and they looked at the data for, this is nationally, so it's not tied to, the state is not tied to Albany, but just to give some reasons, there was a high retirement push based on the pandemic, of course. So there's a lot of employees that retired during the pandemic, and so those needed to be filled. There's also an increase in entrepreneurs. So people starting their own business. Some of the data was basically looking at potentially the stimulus checks that gave someone who's working for someone an extra boost to just kind of start that business that they had been wanting to start. And so a boost in entrepreneurs has also left some of the workforce. There's less there. And there was a couple others, but I'll try and share that slideshow with you from that, so you have that data.
That'd be great. Yeah, and I don't think any of us think that we're trying to solve the hiring problem. I think we're just trying to enable our businesses here to do the best they can, right? To get everybody that they maximize what is available. And I love the idea of adding a question about, obviously who we need to talk about the pay is the people who didn't take the job, but we don't have any contact with them. But what have you heard from potential employees? Something like some question trying to get some sense of reasoning that they're hearing for losing employees. Member Carter?
Yeah, I was just going to say in response to that, we do have a question in there for the biggest challenge hiring employees. But we could add something in there that, if you've extended offers and people have declined, what's been the main reason why, or something around that line.
Yeah, sounds good.
Todd,
Member Chasey.
Yeah, if you're going to do a survey, it might be worthwhile sticking in a question that deals with the issue of toxic employment situations. A lot of people are jacked around by employers. They don't give them the hours they need, or they cut them off just before they qualify for various benefits. There's that issue that some people just finally felt they had the freedom to get out and seek something else, or so on.
I mean, we're polling the businesses. I'm not sure they're going to self-report a toxic work environment. We could, but I love trying to somehow reach the potential employees and their former employees. All right, I see we're at 7 o'clock. Are there any other points on this? Any other comments? All right, seeing none, I will thank everybody for the feedback information. I think it's a very productive meeting. Very excited about that. And future agenda items, I'm not sure has anything come up. I am encouraging subcommittees to meet and make reports. That's how we make progress on our work plan. Any other future agenda items in mind?
Yeah,
Member chases your hand up. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think we do need to look more carefully at this situation, because I can see 30, 40 lots in and around Albany that suddenly will be looking at 5-story buildings.
You mean the crunch in parking, the loss of on-street
or the parking
development?
Issue, but just an entire change of the feel of the street.
Oh, okay.
Light, air, everything. But parking for sure.
Yeah. Other ideas for agenda items?
You know, we'll email Brennan for the subcommittee related to vacancies and potential businesses, and then I think that maybe we'll probably email as well to follow up on the subcommittee about jobs.
And then also, if you could share the slideshow with me, I can post it attach it to this meeting, so it can be viewed later if you'd like.
Please.
Thank you.
Very good. I believe that is it for this meeting. Our next meeting is March 3rd, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.